Well, welcome, Dr. Ripp. Thank you so much for being here and joining us at the Burnout Symposium in LA in 2023. We're so glad to have you here today as a guest speaker.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just going to jump right into it. One of the things we've talked about is how important it is to really empower leaders. And I want to know how you enable and encourage your own leaders to implement successful well-being strategies.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for that question. And, when I think about wellness-centered leadership and enabling leaders to demonstrate those leadership behaviors that really help promote well-being, for me, that fits in the kind of culture of well-being arm of our model. There's lots of models that are out there, but clearly promoting a culture of well-being is central, and leadership is key to that culture. And so there's a couple strategies that we use. First and foremost, creating the trainings. So enabling leaders who, there are many leaders out there that want to develop these skills. Some, do so naturally. I think there's a lot to be said for the natural leader, the one that really understands how to relate to their people, but there are also skills that can be developed. And so one of the things that we do is we've created leadership trainings that enable skills. These are skills around recognition and appreciation. These are skills around coaching and mentorship and so forth. And invite our leaders within our own system to participate and to learn in those trainings. I'll just mention one other strategy, and that is to actually measure the leaders themselves in terms of how they're doing. And there are a number of ways to do this. There exist validated instruments in which an individual can actually rate their leader, and particularly rate them on a number of these types of behaviors, how well they're recognized, take an interest in their career, treat them with respect, and so forth. And you can actually, generate a score. You can track leaders over time. You can give that data to the leaders and say, here's how you've done. Oftentimes, a leader in a healthcare system is competitive with themselves, wants to improve, and so we'll see that. So creating the ability to measure is another important strategy.
Wonderful. And can you give us maybe a couple of examples of leadership strategies that you encourage at Mount Sinai? And I know that you also are a professor and teach at the Stanford course for Chief Wellbeing Officers. So any of that you want to discuss, I would be open to.
Sure. Yeah. I think, obviously it's about kind of making it clear that leaders are part of this picture. We include that as part of our strategic planning. So when we talk about, and in terms of an institutional commitment to well-being, we, through my office, have a strategy. We have a model that we apply, and so as I mentioned before, culture of well-being is one element of a portfolio of offerings. And so one of the ways in which we highlight the importance of this is we bake it into our strategy, and then we share that when we go around the system. For example, when we recently collected data through our faculty survey, which goes out to thousands of faculty members. And so now we are in the process of sharing those findings through a variety of means. But when we do so, say, in a presentation, we will share those data in the context of our strategy. And so we're transparent about the role of leadership. And so the culture change takes time. But it's our hope that this becomes part of the fabric of who we are, that if you are a Mount Sinai leader, you understand that part of what you need to do is address the well-being of the workforce, and be held accountable for it, to make sure it's a priority. So that's certainly baking that into the strategy. And I'll go so far as to say that like many organizations, like Stanford, as you mentioned, there's a host of leadership trainings and courses, and so we partner with a variety of academies across our institution, and have come up with sort of what it means to be a Mount Sinai leader. And as part of that, there's a host of priorities identified. Priorities around obviously commitment to patient care and excellence, commitment to quality and continuous improvement, and well-being is part of that. Commitment to equity is part of that. I guess where I'm going with this is that we have a seat at the table. We are that when you talk about a Mount Sinai leader, well-being is one of the priorities that is right up there with all the others.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you're definitely leading the way, Dr. Ripp, and it's been fun to watch, how Mount Sinai has been evolving, especially over the past several years through the pandemic and the changes that you've made. So I appreciate the work that you're doing and all the education that you're providing for us. You mentioned like wellness centered leadership, and at the base of that is really caring about people always. That's one of the foundations, and I really love that because as doctors and nurses and healthcare frontline workers, we naturally care about people and our patients. I think we struggle with caring for each other and self-care, and I'm curious how you address that. You mentioned implementing that into the fabric of your health system and leadership training. How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's very topical because I think coming out of the pandemic, we're hearing more and more of our leaders being open about their own levels of exhaustion, their own levels of stress that they've been through, which is good. It's good that that people are expressing and being vulnerable and sharing that that they, even our leaders are having a hard time. We know when our leaders are vulnerable that actually promotes psychological safety, so it actually creates a safer workplace. But I think, we need to encourage more leaders to be role models of self-care. I think we're seeing more of it. I think part of it is a sign of the times. But that's got to actually be part of the training. Part of when you train leaders, you have to train leaders to demonstrate vulnerability and to be role models of self-care. Just last week, we had a session with maybe 60 or 70 of our system leaders, and specifically to address some of the exhaustion that many of our leaders have experienced. There was an element of that meeting that was dedicated to mindfulness. And so I think we really are seeing sort of a sea change in the willingness to talk openly about our need to engage in behaviors that promote our own self-care. So we gotta teach it. And we got to model it. We got to say, I for example, I'll say, I can't come to a meeting at that time because, I'm helping my son get off to school. That's not exactly self-care, but,
well, no, it is. My eyebrows went up because as doctors, we're usually not allowed to do that. The culture has been against that in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's self-care for me because obviously, our social connection with family and so forth is restorative. But yeah, it's important for us to role model that and show that this is what we prioritize.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you also are really invested in promoting building community again. We have to rebuild trust, create psychological safety as we transition into a new healthcare system. And I like how you also are encouraging, that aspect of really building community within physicians, nurses, and frontline staff, and giving them opportunities to have that, to nurture those relationships.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we knew the importance of that before the pandemic. And, obviously, by virtue of my communicating with you by Zoom and not in person, we've got work to do to ensure that we're spending more time together, to do it as often as we can in person. There are advantages of our the world that we connect by screen, but obviously something can be lost. And so we need to also make sure that we're maintaining those opportunities to create the connection of our communities.
That's great. Well, any last words for us, Dr. Ripp?
I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference, and I'm really pleased to be invited today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for being a guest as always. And we'll give you feedback on how the workshop went. Hopefully, it's going well so far. And with you, it's definitely an added bonus. So,
Terrific. Thanks. Have a
thank
great
you.
conference.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ripp.
Take care.